So I have to take my girlfriend to the airport tomorrow to go back to her home country, which is not the United States. And I feel simultaneously melancholic and also quite normal. Like, every time I've ever had to do this in a long-term relationship, I seem to have been like overwhelmed by a sense of like oncoming dread where it was like everything I had placed into that one individual, where like it really did feel like a series of small bombs were going off the night prior to taking the person to the airport or me going to the airport. And all the way home, or all the way they were going home, I would feel like I was being crushed from the inside, more and more and more until I kind of plateaued. But I don't really feel anything like that here. Like, I was holding her and both of us cried a little bit. But beyond that, like, I've just kind of felt normal. Like, it seems like my intuitive assumption is things are just going to be normal when she goes home. Like, it's not like I'm not going to miss her. It's not like I haven't had an incredible time while she's been here. But it seems like that part of me that was anxiously like clinging on, it's just not there in relationships anymore. Like, when I look back at all of my relationships prior to this one, they're like unilaterally terrible. Not just for how the other person would behave, but also for how I would behave. I would play a huge fucking role in those relationships being awful. And I think if I had to attribute those failures to any one thing, I think in large part you could attribute them to low self-esteem. I seem to believe that the person that I was with at that time could be my singular source of validation, could be this like external thing I could rely on to feel like a worthwhile human being. But the truth of the matter is, you can never rely on a singular entity for that. Like, that's something that has to come from inside of yourself. You have to believe that you are worthwhile, that you have value, and you have to enjoy your own company. Like, those moments when it was so difficult to let go of the other person were not merely difficult because I was going to miss them. That was only really a tiny part of the story. In large part, they were difficult because I struggled to spend any time by myself. I hated the person that I was with at all hours of the day. But if you're going to love somebody else, if you're going to be truly committed to somebody else, close to somebody else, in a way that respects them, in a way that humanizes them and treats them as they need to be treated, you need to treat yourself that way first. This sounds like boomer advice. This sounds like I just got off the front page of Reddit, like r/relationship advice. But it's the consensus because it's factual. And I feel like it's one of those, like, this is stuff that you hear all the time, either from people who don't actually understand the practical ramifications of it or what it really means, or you hear it from people who, went a long ass time not knowing it and then had to get kicked in the teeth enough times to figure it out, like to learn from experience. I kind of have brain fog right now because I'm sick. I probably have COVID again, but who knows? My long john everything is acting up. That was another component to this. Like, over these last 2 days of her being here, I've been sick, and she's had to take care of me. She generally like makes food for me and stuff like this, like all of this like trad wife type stuff, which I really appreciate her for. But she's been like really doing double duty for me as I've been sick. And when I imagine my past self, I can't help but feel like I would have been, obsessing over the fact that, our trip was somehow ruined because of this, like, inconvenience that ultimately, was not in either of our control. And that's a funny thing there, right? Like, I feel like back when my self-esteem was a lot worse, so much of what I would get mad about all the time, was stuff I had absolutely no control over. Zero. But I wanted out, not just out of those relationships, I wanted out of myself, like, so desperately. I wanted to get away from something I couldn't get away from. And so, how do you remedy that other than by becoming someone that you're able to be around all the time? How do you remedy that than by getting into a relationship that's not based on a felt need for like constant external validation, but instead based on shared mutual respect and enjoying the company of the person that you're around? I feel like these are all really important things to consider that you hear all the time, but it just goes in one ear, comes out the other. That's how it worked for me. I kept thinking, I'm different. I really, all of this quote unquote boomer advice, it doesn't apply to me. I'm different. I'm not. You really do have to work on yourself before you're able to enter something like this. There was a moment that I've thought a bit about from earlier into her being here with me, where we were on a hike in the forest. I posted pictures of it on Twitter, by the way, but we were on a hike in the forest together, and she was leading the way for a bit up a hill, and we were both trudging through these branches, and by accident she pulled this long branch to get it out of her way. I was behind her, and it hit me right in the eye, and it hit me pretty hard. Like, I couldn't see out of that eye for a little bit there, and my first response was to yell out, "Oh fuck, ow," and after a couple seconds after saying that, I laughed, and I was like, I said something along the lines of like, "Wow, that was unfortunate." And she was like freaking out. She was like, "Oh babe, are you okay? Are you okay?" Trying to like comfort me and stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll walk it off. I just need to not look out this eye for a bit. Can you lead the way?" And she was like apologizing profusely. And I said, like, "It's okay. I mean, it was an accident. I know you wouldn't do that on purpose. There's no reason for me to be upset about it. we can't change it. There's no reason to be upset about it if we can't change it. And she seemed so appreciative of me for like what I thought was such a small response to the situation. Because, when you love somebody, you don't treat them poorly over an inconvenience like that, something that's in the past, something you can't change, something that was completely incidental. Like, what good would it have done for either of us for me to, yell at her or something? None. But there was a time when I was yelling all the time at the people that I was dating. And I regret that. I don't look back at those relationships with pride or happiness or anything of the sort. I look back at those relationships as something that were unfortunate stepping stones to growth. Practice relationships, might you say. And I've forgiven myself at this point for the things that I did. But I'm able to now behave in accordance to a set of principles that I always had, but I don't think I was able to or ready to abide by them as I do now. And so I looked back at that one instance, which felt very intuitive to me. It felt easy to handle it in that manner. And I thought of how my old self would have handled it. And he would have probably shouted at any number of those people I used to be with and made a thing of it. But as we walked home after we got done with our hike, I continually reassured her, wrapped my arm around her, and, like I was joking about it. It's difficult to describe how different I feel now, like just as a human being. And it makes me thankful that I did not find her at an earlier stage in my development. Because if I were to do that, I don't think I would have treated her with the respect, the dignity, the love that she deserves. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there is something to be said about this whole concept of practice relationships. Like, a lot of people think it's offensive. A lot of people think it's like that's dehumanizing in its own right. But it's like, if you don't get the experience, how are you going to figure it out? Like, everybody moves on at some point. Everybody, ends up growing in their own way afterwards. And so in that sense, like, the experience is helpful not just to you, but to the other people. But yeah, I think, like, the thing that I needed to reflect on the most, the thing that made me treat others so poorly, was largely like attachment issues that stemmed from low self-esteem and a hatred of myself that I came to project onto the people that I quote-unquote loved. I don't think I really loved these people. I think what I experienced was more like obsession or infatuation, the way that, you would be infatuated with an item at a store, but it's like, that's not a person. A person has a whole set of feelings. They have a whole backstory. They're living, breathing, experiencing as an entity separate from you. That's a whole different ballgame. And I did not grasp the full gravity of that because I was so set in my ways. I was so close-mindedly infatuated with these individuals that I only saw them, as a reflection of myself or an extension of myself. Yeah. And I did things I regretted because of that. But it's like, now, if I were to ask myself, what would I do if Sophia were gone? What would I do? It's pretty easy to answer that question. I would feel pretty bad for a couple months. I would pick myself up, focus on my hobbies, probably go out into the woods for a while, build my little, bushcraft cabin, or, sleep in my winterized tent, and I'd hang out. I'd hang out there making videos and reading books and connecting with the nature. It's not difficult for me to answer questions like that, nor is it difficult for me to imagine me holding on to my conception of myself and continuing to like myself without her there, because my self-esteem is not contingent on her being there in the way that it was in those past relationships. And in that sense, I think it allows me to not just treat her with a lot more respect and kindness, but also myself. That it feels like I show more self-respect through having this mindset. And that's just a crazy thing for me, because all my past relationships, like, I was so toxic in all my past relationships, but not this one, I guess that's what growing up does. It's just kind of crazy to experience, especially when you've made some mistakes as bad as the ones I've made. But yeah, all of this is to say, here in my Long John everything, I'm not too bummed out about what's coming tomorrow. I'm gonna go on a hike afterwards, build a snowman or something. I'll be hanging out. I got plenty of things to do, and that's important. It's important to have things to do, and it's important to want to do them. To be quite honest with you, I'm looking forward to doing a lot of the things that I want to do by myself, and I think that's okay. It should be okay to have all that. In fact, I think it should be encouraged, because the more independence you demonstrate, setting an example in the relationship, it's like the more independence you'll get back. It's that you should be encouraging your partner to be independent themselves, and also you should be trying your best at being independent. And that's how you become equal. You are equal, but you get on an equal footing, you see. What else could I talk about? I feel like I'm missing something here. This is what happens every time. I swear to God, this is what happens every time I record a video. I get it done, and then I'm like, fuck, I missed all of these interesting things to talk about. I wish I talked about this, I wish I talked about that, and it's always the moment that it's too late that this happens. I'm thinking. Okay, dehumanization. Yeah, so you literally can't like anybody if you don't like yourself. If you treat yourself bad on a regular basis, just how bad are you gonna treat everybody else? Think about it. I have never met a single person who has low self-esteem who was nice. Not one. All of them, and I mean all of them, are shitty people in some way. Like, this is just a sad fact about reality. Like, I've met people who have had insecurities who are nice, sure, but people who put no value into themselves whatsoever, literally zero, these people are just bad people. I think Dotsmite is an example of someone like this. That is just a genuinely terrible person. I think there are other examples of people, names that I will not name. But like the way that you treat others with respect is by treating yourself with respect. It's by asserting your boundaries, asserting your boundaries, standing your ground, saying no, but being kind, being respectful to yourself and to others, being patient. Don't be a doormat, but be, patient. Like confidence, courage. It's all of this. Don't let your empathy get the best of you, but also remember where to show it. It's like all of this is balance, right? People who are way off balanced, those people, in my experience, have always been the most difficult people to deal with. And those people leave lasting scars, And so, before you get into the most intimate kind of relationship, what you're gonna need to do is treat yourself with some love. You gotta build that self-esteem. You gotta become more reliable, more responsible, more stable. And that's another component to this. There have been plenty of moments where, and I'm not gonna go into detail about them, if I were my old self, if I were who I used to be, I think I would have caused a scene. I think I would have done something for attention. I would have done something begging for validation, but I didn't. I had a mature conversation about it, and we moved on. That's what you do. You talk about it, you move on. I want to do a video in the future about specifically how to have conversations, because I feel as though I was kind of inundated with this communication nonsense all the time. Like, when given relationship advice, just communicate as much as possible. I never had trouble communicating with people. I feel like that's something certain people really need to hear. I was not one of them. I think it's literally possible to communicate too much. And I also think that at some points communication just becomes kind of unproductive. And so I want to go into detail about specifically what you should communicate about and how, and like ground rules for how to do it, because I feel like people are hearing all the time, you gotta communicate more, but I feel like they don't really know how. They're just kind of divulging like every random thought that comes to mind with no regards for like what's valuable to talk about or how to talk about it. So I think that'll be a topic for a future video. But in conclusion, before you love someone else, you gotta love yourself. It's just a fact. And also, I've come a long goddamn way, that's for sure. So anyway, I love my girlfriend.